What really happens when you escape North Korea? The movies make it look like crossing a border leads to instant freedom, but the truth is far more complex and infinitely more harrowing than most people realize. Every year, thousands of North Koreans risk everything to escape one of the world's most brutal regimes. But what they find on the other side isn't the freedom they dreamed of. It's often a nightmare that makes their original suffering seem almost bearable. Today, we're going to follow the real journey of Yeonmi Park, who escaped North Korea at just 13 years old. What happened to her after crossing that frozen river will shatter everything you think you know about escape, survival, and what it truly costs to be free. This isn't just a story about one girl's journey, it's the untold reality of what really happens when you try to escape the world's most isolated prison state. And I have to warn you, the truth is darker than anything you've imagined. Born in 1993 in Haesan, North Korea, Yeonmi Park entered a world that most of us can barely comprehend. North Korea isn't just a dictatorship, it's a prison state where 25 million people live under complete control, where asking the wrong question can mean death, and where the outside world might as well be another planet. From her earliest memories, Yeonmi was taught that Kim Jong-il could read her thoughts. She learned to whisper, even to herself, afraid that speaking her true feelings aloud could endanger her family. Imagine growing up believing that your leader is literally a god, that your country is paradise, and that everyone outside your borders is living in misery, desperately wanting to get in. But even in this carefully constructed reality, cracks began to show. Yeonmi's father was a government worker, but their family still struggled with hunger. The Great Famine of the 1990s had devastated North Korea, and food was scarce. She remembers eating grass and tree bark just to fill her stomach, watching her father grow thinner and weaker. The first real crack in her worldview came through something as simple as a DVD. Her father had smuggled in a copy of Titanic, a dangerous act that could have resulted in execution. But when Yeonmi watched it, she saw something that shattered her understanding of the world. She saw people who could speak freely, who could love whom they chose, who could dream of different lives. That moment planted a seed, dangerous and fragile but undeniably real. For the first time, 13-year-old Yeonmi Park began to question everything she had been taught. The decision to escape wasn't born from a grand plan for freedom. It started with desperation. Yeonmi's father had been imprisoned for illegal trading. His attempt to provide for his family had made him a criminal in the state's eyes. When he was released, he was broken, both physically and mentally. Her older sister, Yeonmi, had already disappeared. The family believed she had tried to escape to China and had either been captured or worse. The not knowing was its own form of torture. Faced with a dying father, a missing sister, and the constant threat of starvation, Yeonmi's mother made an impossible choice. They would attempt to cross the frozen Yalu River into China. It wasn't really about freedom. They didn't even fully understand what freedom meant. It was about survival. The night they left, Yeonmi was 13 years old. As they approached the river, her mother told her something that would haunt her for years. Whatever happens, don't look back. If I die, keep going. Promise me you'll keep going. They crossed in March 2007 when the river was still partially frozen. Every step could have been their last. Falling through the ice meant death. Being spotted by border guards meant torture and execution. But somehow, step by terrifying step, they made it across. What they found on the other side wasn't freedom. It was a different kind of nightmare. The man who helped them cross the river wasn't a humanitarian, he was a human trafficker. Within hours of reaching what they thought was safety, Yeonmi and her mother were separated and sold. What happened next is almost too horrific to comprehend, and Yeonmi has spoken courageously about experiences that many survivors never find the strength to share. She was sold to a Chinese man who subjected her to sexual slavery. At 13, she was forced into a world of violence and abuse that would break most adults. But perhaps even more devastating was what happened to her mother. To protect Yeonmi from even worse treatment, her mother was forced to make unthinkable sacrifices. The bond between them became both their source of strength and their shared trauma. For 2 years, they lived in this shadow world in China. Yeonmi learned Mandarin, adapted to survive, and slowly began to understand the true scope of the outside world. She discovered that South Korea wasn't the poverty-stricken wasteland she'd been told about. She learned about the internet, about books, about ideas that had never existed in her previous reality. But they weren't safe. China has a policy of returning North Korean refugees, and discovery meant being sent back to certain death. They lived in constant fear, never able to trust anyone completely, always knowing that tomorrow could be their last day of even this limited freedom. During this time, they received devastating news through smuggled communications. Yeonmi's father had died. The man who had tried so hard to provide for his family, who had been punished for his efforts to keep them alive, was gone. They couldn't even mourn him properly. But sometimes, in the deepest darkness, an unexpected light appears. In 2009, Yeonmi and her mother made contact with Christian missionaries who were part of an underground network helping North Korean refugees. These people risked their own lives to help strangers, asking for nothing in return except the chance to restore some humanity to the world. The journey to South Korea required crossing the entire width of China, then through Mongolia, thousands of miles through territories where discovery meant capture. They traveled at night, hid during the day, and trusted their lives to people they had never met. The most dangerous part was crossing the Gobi Desert into Mongolia. They walked for days through terrain that has claimed countless lives, carrying only what they could fit in small backpacks. Yeonmi was 16 now, no longer the terrified child who had crossed the river, but she was still far from the woman she would become. When they finally reached the Mongolian border, they were arrested by Mongolian authorities. But unlike in China, this arrest was the beginning of their real freedom. Mongolia doesn't return North Korean refugees. After processing, they were sent to South Korea. On that plane to Seoul, Yeonmi looked down at the lights of cities she had never imagined could exist. For the first time in her life, she began to understand what the word freedom actually meant. Freedom, Yeonmi discovered, was more complicated than she had imagined. In South Korea, she was safe, but she was also completely lost. She had to learn how to live in a world where she could speak freely, where she could choose her own path, where she could dream about the future. The education system was overwhelming. She was years behind academically, having never learned basic concepts that South Korean children took for granted. She struggled with the language, with technology, with social customs that were completely foreign to her. But, slowly, she began to build a new life. She learned English, eventually well enough to attend university in America. She studied criminal justice, driven by a desire to understand the systems that could either oppress or protect human dignity. More importantly, she began to find her voice. In 2014, at the age of 21, she gave a speech at the One Young World Summit that would change everything. Standing before an international audience, she shared her story with a power and clarity that left people in tears. "I am here today," she said, "because I was lucky. But millions of my people are still trapped in that darkness. I cannot enjoy my freedom while they suffer in silence." That speech, viewed by millions online, launched her into a role she never expected, becoming one of the world's most powerful advocates for human rights and North Korean freedom. Today, Yeonmi Park is the author of best-selling books, including In Order to Live, which has been translated into dozens of languages. She speaks at universities, conferences, and government hearings around the world. She has testified before the United Nations and met with world leaders. But perhaps most importantly, she has become a voice for the voiceless, those 25 million people still trapped in North Korea, and the countless others around the world living under oppressive regimes. Her message is both simple and profound. Every human being deserves the right to think freely, to speak freely, to dream freely. She reminds us that freedom isn't free, it requires constant vigilance, constant courage, and constant compassion for those who don't yet have it. Yeonmi's story is a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. From a terrified 13-year-old crossing a frozen river to a powerful advocate speaking truth to power, her journey embodies the very essence of finding light after dark. She often says that she didn't choose to become an activist, survival chose it for her. But in choosing to use her voice, to share her pain in service of others' freedom, she has transformed her own darkness into a light that illuminates the path for others. As we face our own challenges, as we encounter moments when hope seems distant, Yeonmi Park's story reminds us that even in the darkest circumstances, the human spirit can not only survive but ultimately triumph. The little girl who once believed that a dictator could read her thoughts now speaks her truth to the world, and in doing so, she proves that light can indeed emerge from even the deepest darkness. This has been the story of Yeonmi Park, brought to you by Light After Dark. If her journey has moved you, consider learning more about the ongoing struggle for human rights around the world. And remember, sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply refusing to let darkness have the final word.